Okay, so a former Doge engineer allegedly walks out of the Social Security Administration with a USB drive containing the personal data of over 500 million Americans, and the defense officials sitting in front of Congress had never heard of it. Meanwhile, 4,000 troops are deployed to an American city in violation of federal law, and the best answer they've got is a legal gray area between Title 10 and Title 32. So this hearing, Rep. Whitesides is asking defense and intelligence officials about 4 different things: the Iran war, the data breach, the NCTC director quitting, and troops in Los Angeles, and the witnesses keep saying the same thing. I wasn't aware. I didn't know. This is the first I'm hearing of this. Watch their faces. And if you're not subscribed, now's the time, because the breakdown after this is where the real story is.
That's the gentleman from California, Mr. Whiteside.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. It's good to see you, General Gio. I want to start by recognizing the extraordinary bravery and professionalism of our armed services, servicing both in the Middle East and around the world. And I join with all of those on the committee who are mourning the families of those who have been lost in the conflict in the Middle East. Mr. Humir, 2 weeks ago I asked the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, who I believe is your boss,
correct,
whether the department had forecast how high gas prices could get during the Iran conflict. He said he didn't know, but he said he'd check back. We haven't heard anything. Have you done any analysis? Are you aware of anyone in the department who has looked at how high gas prices could get?
I have not, Congressman, but I'm happy to take that question back to Undersecretary Colby.
Okay. We heard that 2 weeks ago, and we haven't heard anything. And the American public, I think, rightfully needs to know how high gas prices are going to get during this conflict. So I hope you can get back to us soon. Can you commit to a date by which you can get back to us?
No, Congressman, because this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So I'm happy to take that back and get back to your office.
Recently, the department labeled a leading provider of artificial intelligence tools, tools which have been used in the administration's own high-profile military deployments, a supply chain risk in large part simply because they did not commit to making the tool capable of mass surveillance of Americans. Mr. Humir, is mass surveillance of law-abiding Americans a capability that you have identified as necessary for ensuring the security of Americans?
No, it's not.
Is the Department of Defense currently targeting American communications in bulk, whether through the Defense Intelligence Agency or otherwise?
Not that I'm aware of.
You would be aware of it?
I imagine so, but I'm not aware of any program of that nature.
Are you aware of recent reports that a DOJ employee allegedly made off with millions of American Social Security records in a USB key?
No.
The databases called Numident and the Master Death File include records for more than 500 million living and dead Americans, including Social Security numbers, places and dates of birth, citizenship, race and ethnicity, and parents' names. Does the Department of Defense think it helps U.S. national security to seek to destroy the American company that is now the leading U.S. provider for enterprise AI and AI-guided coding?
Congressman, this is the first time I'm hearing about this issue. I'll consult with the team. This is the first time I've been brought to my attention, so I lack the specifics on this specific case.
Okay. General Gio or General Donovan, do you work with the National Counterterrorism Center in your work?
Yes, sir. We do at Northcom.
You're aware that the NCTC is the primary organization in the U.S. government for analyzing and integrating all intelligence possessed or acquired by the government pertaining to terrorism?
Yes, sir.
You're aware that unlike many other intelligence agencies, the NCTC has the unique authority to draw upon and analyze intelligence collected both inside and outside the United States?
I was not aware of the latter point.
Are you aware that the director of the NCTC, who would have access to basically all data related to terrorist or other threats to the United States, just resigned, saying that Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation?
Congressman, I was not aware that he resigned.
Just have a couple minutes left. After the administration mobilized 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 Marines to Los Angeles, I joined my LA delegation, HASC colleagues, in demanding full transparency from Secretary of Defense Hegseth on the constitutionality and execution of the deployment. In December, the Supreme Court ruled that the President cannot bypass congressional approval or the Posse Comitatus Act simply by labeling it as enforcing federal law. Mr. Humir, Will the administration commit to following the Supreme Court's order in this case and not to send troops into our own cities under unconstitutional grounds?
My understanding, Congressman, is that the constitutional grounds that the Department has used are both Title 10 or Title 32 authorities that allow the Department to be able to deploy forces at the discretion of the governors under Title 32 or discretion of the President under Title 10.
Yeah, I think the Supreme Court disagrees with you. But I appreciate your service, and I appreciate all of your service, and I yield back.
All right, so let's start with the one that should terrify every single person watching this. Whitesides just told a room full of defense officials that a rogue employee at a leading AI defense contractor walked out of the SSA with the numbnament database and the master death file on a standard USB drive. Over 500 million records, social security numbers, dates of birth, race, ethnicity, parents' names, and Mr. Humir sits there and says he's never heard of it. The guy advising Congress on national security threats had no idea that the largest personal data breach in American history allegedly already happened. And here's what makes this even worse. According to the Washington Post and NPR reporting from March 2026, the individual in question is a former DOGE software engineer named John Solly. He worked at the SSA, got approved access to the numbnament database, and then in October left to become chief technology officer at Leidos, a defense contractor with a $1.5 billion contract with the SSA. The SSA's own former chief data officer, Charles Borges, filed a separate whistleblower complaint saying DOGE personnel uploaded a live copy of the numbnament to an unsecured cloud environment with zero independent security oversight. Borges told NPR this would have, quote, generational consequences, and the inspector general is now investigating. But the witness in that chair? Never heard of it. And Whitesides doesn't let up. He keeps pressing on the data breach, and you can see the witness scrambling. Because this isn't some hypothetical cyber attack from a foreign adversary. This is allegedly an inside job. A guy who told his coworkers he had God-level access to SSS systems, that he had the data on a thumb drive, and that he believed he'd get a presidential pardon if anything went wrong. And somehow the people testifying before Congress on national defense had no information about it. Now Whitesides pivots to Los Angeles, and this is where the legal argument falls apart completely. He confronts the witness about the administration deploying 4,000 National Guard troops and 700 active-duty Marines to the streets of L.A., and the witness tries to justify it using Title 10 and Title 32 authorities, which is basically the government's way of saying we found a technicality. But here's what the article on screen lays out that the witness conveniently skips over. The Posse Comitatus Act of 1878 strictly prohibits the federal government from using the military to enforce civilian laws without explicit congressional approval. In September 2025, federal judge Charles Breyer ruled that the LA deployment was illegal, that it violated the Posse Comitatus Act, and that the administration was essentially trying to create a national police force with the president as its chief. That's not my characterization. That's from the ruling. And Whitesides isn't buying the Title 10 versus Title 32 defense either, and he shouldn't because the Supreme Court rejected the administration's emergency appeal of a lower court ruling blocking the Chicago deployment. A Trump-appointed judge in Portland called the administration's description of the city as war-ravaged, quote, untethered to facts. Multiple federal courts looked at this and said no, but the witness acts like there's a legitimate legal debate here. There isn't. And that's the trick with the Title 10 versus Title 32 distinction. Under Title 10, troops are under federal control and clearly restricted by the Posse Comitatus Act. But under Title 32, National Guard units are technically under state control, just funded by the federal government. So the administration keeps toggling between these two statuses to maneuver troops into American cities while claiming they're not violating federal law. Constitutional scholars call it a dangerous legal gray area that lets the executive branch bypass restrictions and deploy combat-ready forces into civilian neighborhoods without proper oversight. And that's exactly what happened in LA. Then comes the part about the NCTC director. Whitesides asks about Joe Kent, the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, resigning after allegedly stating that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States, and the general says he was unaware of the resignation. The head of the NCTC, a Senate-confirmed Trump appointee, publicly quits in protest of the war, posts his resignation letter on X for the entire world to see, and the general testifying before Congress doesn't know about it. And this is not some minor bureaucratic shuffle. Joe Kent is a retired Green Beret, 11 combat deployments, Gold Star husband. Trump personally nominated him. He was confirmed by the Senate in July 2025. And on March 17, 2026, he posted a resignation letter saying he could not in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. He accused high-ranking Israeli officials and members of the American media of deploying a misinformation campaign that deceived the president into believing Iran was an imminent threat. He compared it directly to the lead-up to Iraq. Trump's response? I always thought he was weak on security. Didn't know him well. He nominated the guy. And here's the part that should concern everyone regardless of where you stand politically. Kent's job was literally to assess terrorist threats and advise the president. He had access to the most sensitive intelligence in the country, and his professional conclusion, stated publicly and under his own name, was that the justification for this war was manufactured. Meanwhile, top Democrats on the intelligence committees said they were never presented with evidence of an imminent threat. So who exactly saw this evidence? Because the guy whose entire job was to evaluate it says it doesn't exist. And then Whitesides brings it back to what every American is actually feeling right now, gas prices. He asks the defense officials point-blank whether the Department of Defense forecasted how high gas prices would spike due to the conflict with Iran, and the answer is no, no analysis was done. They sent the country to war without running the numbers on what it would cost the people paying for it at the pump. And the numbers are devastating. According to the Joint Economic Committee, in just 1 month of this war, American households paid $4 billion more for gasoline. Oil jumped past $90 a barrel, up from $67 the day before the strikes. It now costs $145 to fill up the average pickup truck. Gas prices spiked over $1 per gallon in battleground states like Texas, North Carolina, and Georgia. Qatar warned oil could hit $150 a barrel. In the Department of Defense, the people who planned this operation never ran an economic impact forecast. They had no plan for what this would do to you. That's not oversight. That's negligence with the defense budget. So here's the full picture. A former DOJ employee allegedly walks out with 500 million Americans' data, and the witnesses don't know about it. Troops were deployed to American cities in violation of federal law, and the witnesses call it a gray area. The head of counterterrorism quits, saying the war was based on a lie and the witnesses weren't aware. And gas prices explode and nobody ran the numbers. That's 4 crises, 1 hearing, and 0 answers. And the people who are supposed to be keeping this country safe can't tell you a single thing about any of them. I'll see you in the next one.